All righty, we are live and we have got a special guest. I'm glad we've already got some people in the viewership here among us. We've got CCC and Hatchet Force and one of our first guests, Mr. Terry Cadenback, already in the house. Zero Mike Foxtrot, one of our overseas viewers, is already joining us. Beard Ben is already joining us. So thank y'all guys for getting here to join us. We've got a wonderful guest today. And as far as I know, his first time ever doing anything like this. We've got a special guest. This is Jason Hardy's Team History Volume 1 of the remake with none other than John Good on the cover. And we happen to have as our guest today none other than himself, John Good. So, Mr. John, I'm going to pass it on to you and let you take over.
Okay, well, that's quite an introduction. I don't know where, I guess a little backstory, how I got into SF and Macvsog. I was oddly enough originally drafted, and during processing, I went in to a room where they gave you options, and there was a great big guy standing behind the fellow who had the files and wearing odd looking fatigues, which turned out to be jungle fatigues, rare thing to be seen then in the US. And he reached over the guy's shoulder and he plucked my file out of his hand and said, "I want to talk to this man when you're done with it." And my first thought was, what did I do wrong? How did I screw up? So anyway, it turned out it was a briefing for, there was probably about 30 or 40 of us in the room. It was a briefing about special forces, which I happen to know a little bit, having seen something on TV about them earlier in the 60s. So it was an opportunity to choose to try and qualify for SF. So I went ahead and said yes. About half the room walked out when they were told they had to be airborne. And the rest did later on. So myself and one other guy took the test, and I was the only one that passed. But early on, I originally was a 12B, a combat engineer, in my early training. Went to Bragg and trained as a 05B, a radio operator, which I wasn't too happy about, but that's okay. Got through that and was assigned to the third group, which was kind of a non-starter because the third group at the time was responsible for Africa. And in those days, there were so many mercenaries running around Africa that they didn't need any special forces people because we came with too many strings attached. So, in fact, the only thing I can recall us doing in Africa was when they had a famine in Biafra. We sent some medical teams down, and that was about it. But, and I ended up in the headquarters company because somebody found out I could type. And I was cooling my heels there, trying to figure a way to get out. And the sergeant major called us in, about 8 of us, I guess it was. And he said, "I've got some good news and I've got some bad news." And the third group at this point was starting to wind down, right? They were starting to break it up. So he said, "I've got some good news and some bad news." He said, "The good news is you're all going to Vietnam." He said, "The bad news," he said, "Good, you're going to MACV-SOG." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You'll find out." And so from that point on, I was going all over the place asking people, "What's MACV-SOG? Anybody ever heard of MACV-SOG?" Somebody told me, said, "Go up to the photo shop and talk to Chief." He was there. So I went up to see Chief, and I said to him, I said, what do you know about MACV-SOG? He said, "Why?" Yeah, I said, "Because I got orders to go there."
Oh.
He said, "Oh." He said, "Well, tell them you want to go to the Central Highlands." And that was the only thing he'd tell me. He said, "Don't go to the Delta. Tell them you want to go to the Central Highlands." I said, "Okay." So when I went to Vietnam, I was in a long line of SF guys amongst a whole bunch of others. And some kid in some leg, or I don't know what unit he was in, he had a pistol. And he was afraid the MPs were going to catch him with it. So one of the SF guys, I forget who it was, bought it off of him for some ridiculous amount of money. And when we walked through, they said, "You got anything?" And everybody just looked, no, and they let us walk right through.
Of course.
So when we got to Vietnam, I went over to the train, went to the sergeant major, and he had a big whiteboard behind him. And he said, "I see you're an 05B." He said, "I've got quite a number of slots on A teams all over the place." And I said, by this time I really wanted to find out what MACV-SOG was. So I said, "I think I'll go to MACV-SOG." And he said, "Oh," he said, "where do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, the Highlands." So he said, "Okay." And they put me on a plane to Pontoon. And we got there, and C-130, and the thing came to a rolling stop on the ramp. Briefly, the ramp came down on the back of the plane. They threw our bags off, told us to get off, and took off, right? And because they didn't like hanging around on the airstrip.
No.
And so we're standing there, and some guy was sitting over in a Jeep with his feet up on the wheel. And he said, "You guys going to MACV-SOG?" We said, "Yeah." He said, "Hop in." So we went on. It was about noontime. He dropped us off in front of the flagpole. And he said, "Well, first sergeant in here." And, everything was closed down for lunch. And I was sitting there under the flagpole, and Jeff May and a couple other guys came walking by and saw me, and we'd all gone through training together. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I don't know. I just got here." He said, "Well, we're going to lunch. You come with us."
Wow.
And so I went with him. He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I have no idea." He said, "Well, tell them you want recon." He said, "That's where everybody is." I said, "Okay." So when I went in to see the first sergeant, again, he had a big whiteboard behind him with slots on it. He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I'll do recon." He said, "Are you sure about that?" I said, "Yeah, that's where all my friends are." He said, "Okay."
Wow.
He said, "Remember," he said, "you can always change your mind," which is something the sergeant major in the training had also told me. He said, when I told him I wanted to go to MACV, he said, "Well, remember, you can always change your mind." And so I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And so anyway, I got assigned to Recon Company. I went down for the briefing, and down in the underground talk that we had at the time, and before it got blown up later on. And they had these walls with these big red curtains, floor to ceiling, top secret across them. And they threw them back, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, where's Vietnam? Because it was all Laos and Cambodia, North Vietnam. And that's when I started to get an inkling of what MACV-SOG was about. But my first team was RT Arizona with Newman Ruff, who was quite a character. Mike Wilson, Newman Ruff, Finish. What was that kid's name? I can't remember one kid's name. Anyway, ran with him for a good while. And then RT Texas, Bill Spurgeon, knew he was leaving not too long, and he was looking around. So I got tapped to come over and backfill him and kind of a overlap transition, so that I knew the team, worked with the team for a while, been in the field with the team. And then when Bill left, I just became the 1-0. So, and that's Bill there with a headband on. Let me see here. I'm over there with the other headband and the sunglasses. That's Woody up there, up top. That's Nace down here. Peo sitting right by me over to him, Roland Peo. He was the 0-1, the Montagnard equivalent of the 1-0, right? Good team. And so anyway, I took over as 1-0. I think I had one of the first all Molten Yard teams. I took it to Halo school and got everybody Halo qualified. Ran a good few missions. I got injured doing Halo at one point, prepping for a mission. And so I was laid up for a while. They medevaced me to, what was it, Long Binh hospital there, and they tried to medevac me from there. And I called MACV-SOG headquarters in Saigon, and they sent a major and two NCOs out, and they spirited me out of the hospital, put me on a Blackbird, and sent me back to Khartoum. And I became the operations sergeant for a while in the Recon Company. And by the time I was able to get around again and back in shape, I went back to Long Thanh and made a jump just to, once you fall off the horse, you got to get back up. And then I became a bit of a floating 1-0, ran with RT Wyoming.
Wow.
And that was kind of it at the time. Joe Walker, Emmett Dover, and I put together a thing called the CRP, Combat Recon Platoon, which was designed as to recover POWs or do short raids on specific targets. And it was our 3 teams plus a headquarters element and a medical element. And the reason it came about was because after Son Tay, we were saying we would get reports of prisoner camps, but we had no real specific ability to do anything about it. So that was what we organized this for. And we had a mortar section, and it was pretty heavy duty. And we had Air Force SOS, I think it was 20th SOS choppers, the dual engine turbo choppers were our support element, and pretty good. That's Emmett Dover down on the lower right. That's Paul Houchin, I believe, up there. Standing there.
This says this is during the CRP time frame. I don't know if it is, but the book or label under the picture says this is a CRP era.
Yeah, it was the idea was the Air Force would either put us on top of a POW camp or next to it, and then we would drive to the camp. Casualties would be left while the medics treated them. We'd pick them up on the way back out. The only thing we carried was weapons and ammo and medical stuff, obviously. And so it was meant to be a hard-hitting, fast-moving, no time on the ground, to speak of kind of thing. Hours as opposed to days, and if that even that long. And I remember some brass came up. We went out to the yard camp, and some brass came up from Saigon to watch a demonstration. And one guy said, "I wouldn't put a reinforced infantry company against that group." And there's Newman Ruff, the man himself. You can't tell what he's carrying there.
That's that famous chopped M14 with the broomstick and the fully.
He carried most of the time. He carried a carbine, an old 30 cal carbine, and he loved that thing. And he one time we went out for a POW snatch, and so we got all set up. And Ruff said, "I'll shoot him in the leg when somebody comes by. I'll shoot him in the leg, and then you guys pop out and grab him." So we're all set up, and sure enough, after a while, this NVA comes walking down the trail, and he's got this big rucksack on his back. And he's walking along, and Ruff pop hits him. And you could see as he's walking, you could see his leg kind of bend. You know, you knew he got hit, and then he jumped up and he started running.
Oh,
before anybody could get out there and grab him, he was off sprinting down the trail, and they blew a claymore on him to stop him. And turned out he was carrying hot chow for for apparently a group that was very close. So we ended up beating feet out of there before they caught up with us.
wow. I did not realize that. Wow. That we've got another and one of the questions, since we've got Mr. Newman's photo up, and well, there's actually two. One gentleman has one and I've got another one. But did Newman ever go out with that M14A2 with you? Take it, or was he always carrying the carbine?
He always carried the carbine when I was with him. He and I later got together on setting up a different set of halo equipment, because we were talking one time. We said, well, maybe one of the problems is when we'd go out, and of course halo was kind of early days for halo then, and didn't have all the special gear and everything else, and so we came up with a modified Indigenous rucksack to slim that down a little bit, make it a little easier to maneuver with. And then we also tested out some different weapons, and we ended up coming up with an Israeli Uzi with a collapsible stock. We found that an AK chest pack, you could put, I think it was 9 Uzi magazines in it. A collapsed Uzi would fit on your reserve chute, and we could just bow tie it down so that when you with a magazine in it, so that when you hit the ground, all you had to do was roll and undo those ties, hit, chamber around, and you were ready to rock and roll. And it was also much more compact and easier to jump with. So, and we tried different things. We were always experimenting with different things. So.
A lot of people, well, I have been sharing it here lately, but not too many people know that Mr. Newman, excuse me, Mr. Newman was actually on, I believe, wasn't he on the second Halo combat Halo jump, or was it the third? I know he was on one of the first three.
He was on the one with Storter and Moye. I think that was
Millard. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first one in Pontoon.
Wow.
That was the one I was supposed to be on, and I got injured.
That's what I thought. And how did your injury come about during that? Was it just a mess up during the jump, or
it was a mess up during training, and we were doing some jumps, and we jumped out in with all full equipment, and we jumped out into very high winds. We probably shouldn't have been jumping anyway. And so as we were coming in, Millard Moye and I were coming in fairly close to one another. And where I was coming in, there was a big dead tree. And so I kind of lifted and missed it. And right on the other side of it was a bomb crater. And as I came by, I thought I was going to miss. But what happened was I came by, I don't know if you can see it or not, but the boots, say if this was my right side coming into land, my boot clipped the top of the crater rim and swung me up. So when I landed, I just landed just straight flat down on my equipment. Mm-hmm. And the wind was such that the chute I couldn't get the chute collapsed. So it picked me up and it slammed me down about 3 or 4 more times. And before I could get the quick releases off. And it tore up a bunch of muscle in my abdomen and right hip and my thigh. And so, they medevaced me to Long Bend. At first they thought my pelvis was broken, but it turned out it was all muscle damage. And so I just had to wait it out till it got better.
Boy, that's that's a tough one, man. Yeah, I mean, it was bad enough, but it sounds like you got mighty lucky on that one. That could have been a whole lot worse.
Oh yeah.
Wow, gosh. Yeah, that group jump with jump team Storter. That's a pretty legendary group of jumpers. Millard Moy, Mr. Newman, Jim Storter, and I'm blanking on the last man's name. I'm trying to look it up at the moment. I've got it laying
I
around.
know his name. I can't think right off.
I'll
Anyway,
find while you're talking, I'll find it and I'll get it out here. But
I have to say the Montagnards love going to Okinawa.
that I didn't realize. Well, yeah, those that were doing airborne training and all that.
So
was this a CRP or was this
no, this was RT Texas.
Hi, oh wow, boy, y'all were ready for action then.
Yeah. So in the picture you're showing, if you see the guy that's standing to the right of me, I guess it'd be my left side, but he's a tall, wearing a black hat, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes, sir.
That was his name was Ital Mak. He was a Rade from Bon Mituit, and he came up looking for a job. Some guys brought him in, and we were looking for somebody, so we hired him. And we found out later he was a full row commander.
Wow.
He took up the collections on payday, but initially we had a little issue because he was used to being the boss, and I was used to being the boss, and so we had to get that sorted out. But he was one of the few Montagnards I ever saw that could just about look me eyeball to eyeball. I'm 6'3", and
I was about to say that's the biggest Indigenous man I've seen thus far in any SOG photo. That is a big man.
He was a big fella, but it was funny when we went to Halo training. He did not want to get out of that. He was no. And we had to kind of talk him out, and he finally went out. We were using some helicopters, some of those Air Force helicopters, and jumping from about 10,000 feet. And he went out, and I remember he hit the ground. He jumped up and he said, "We go again. We go again." Yeah. He loved it. He was a convert right there.
I was about to say that reminds me of a story. I can't remember if it's Mr. Howard or maybe if it was Mike Shepard's Montana group. They got down there and thought they were just going to be doing the regular old practice jumps that their people had been talking about amongst the camp. And then, either Mike or Howard said, no, we're going to be going up, high, very high, 10,000 or, real high. And the Montagnard looked at him and said, yards no do. And some of them walked off and some of them stayed and ended up doing it and ended up loving it. And as a matter of fact, the group that stayed, 2 of them were honor graduates and ended up becoming the first 2 Indigenous Halo instructors at Long Thanh. Yeah. Interesting enough.
Yeah. But, once they got into it, they loved. I remember the first jump I made though, before I took the team, and there were 4 of us on a tailgate of a 130, and they told us, they said, "Go away," and they told us to walk out, and there were 4 of us and 2 instructors, and they said, "Look up at the tail." And there's a red and a green light up in the tail that you watch, right, when you're on the ramp. I said, watch for the green light. When the green light comes, just take a step and just step off, right? And so, and they said, and don't look down. So I'm standing there, and your first jump is about 10,000 feet. So I'm standing there, and I've done a lot of jumps at this point. As far as static line, but I think the highest I'd ever gone static line was about 4,000 feet. And I looked down and I was standing there. I looked down like that and I went, oh shit.
Boy,
And about that time, the two instructors behind us hit us like that right square in the back and knocked us all four of us out of the plane. And we were just flipping and flopping, and we were all over the place for the first few seconds, and until you got it sorted out, got yourself stabilized. But it was a surprise.
Well, there's several questions coming up before we get to the viewer questions. I hate to take away from the viewers, but now you've got my curiosity. While we're talking about the group we've got here on screen, I noticed you've got a lot of RPDs. You've still got your Car 15 with the grenade launcher and everything. I'm sure this will come up. Was this even with Arizona? Another question I'll do with Arizona, but was this the basic loadout for all of your teams, or was this specialty for Texas, y'all's heavy loadout, so to speak?
Well, Ruff wasn't a heavy guy. Ruff was he was a believer in very small groups. I mean, I went on one mission with him. We went deep into Cambodia before the invasion. There was him, me, and two Montagnards, and we were in an NVA division rear area, and we were in there. I remember he took 40 toe poppers with him, and we heard them all go off before we left.
Woof.
But we were wearing NVA boots, so that they make it difficult for them to track us.
Okay, now I can't remember. I get all of these stories floating around in my head. Now you told me a wild story, and I can't remember if this was your first mission or not, but you told me about a mission about you and Mr. Newman running. He had his 30 cal, of course. I've got in my notes, I think you were carrying the radio, and y'all were evidently looking for a wiretap, and y'all get into all kinds of stuff. And I think y'all are chased for a few days.
Yeah.
Can you share that story for the guys? That's a good one.
Yeah, I was carrying the radio, and so we came to the high-speed trail along a ridge line, and we came up there. We found the cable. It was coax cable running along. It was actually suspended, and so we put out security, and I'm setting up the radio, and we had a tape recorder, which was they had some you put these prongs in the coax, and it went back to a tape recorder so you could record whatever was going across the line. We're all getting all set up, and I had this cord. We had these cords that ran out to the security, and I had them tied on my foot. So if the guys on the right side saw something coming, they could jerk the cord, give us a little heads up. So Ruff's out there fiddling around with a cable and decides he wants to bury a toe popper out in the trail. So he's down there digging around in the trail, and all of a sudden my right foot just gets jerked out, right? Or well, actually, back up 1 second. Before that, the interpreter is on the headphones, and he poked me and he said, "They know we're here." And I said, "Well, I'm sure." I said, "They probably know we're in the area." So he said, No, they know we here. And that's when my foot got jerked. And he said, "They say you send out, basically a reaction force from your end, and we'll send out one from our side, and we'll catch them in the middle." So my foot gets jerked. I'm trying to call Ruff back in. And on the right side, all of a sudden, claymores and gunfire starts going off. And Ruff comes running back. I'm trying to get these cords that are tied around my ankle off, right? And I was kind of screened by some brush. And everybody's shooting and firing and falling back. And I get the radio on, and I look, and I'm all by myself behind these bushes. And I can see the NVA over to the side and all our guys over to my left, right? I'm kind of in the middle. And so I'm hunkered down, and they go, okay, count 1, 2. And then they jumped up and let off a bunch of fire. And I jumped up and ran like hell and dove over a log about the time a B-40 went off on the other side of a tree from me. But some SPADs came online and started hosing the area. And we piled all the rucksacks except for the radio in a pile, and Ruff blew those, and we took off running and ran down the mountain and almost got bombed by a SPAD. But I'm screaming over the radio, pull up, pull up, pull up. And he did at the last minute. And while we were running, we got to the bottom and we're all huffing and puffing. And I reached up sweating, and I kind of did like that with my and came back down, and my entire hand and wrist was covered with blood. And I said, oh my God, I've been hit in the head. And what had happened was, as we were running, one of those big thorns they had over there went right through my lobe, right through my ear, and just kind of ripped it open. And so it wasn't as bad as we thought, but we ran for a while and all over the place. And we were laying there one night. We'd probably been a couple of days, I don't know. And we were laying on the side of the mountain one night, and the NBA were up above us, and they had flashlights, and they were walking back and forth on a trail above us. And you could hear them talking. And they said, we know they're around here somewhere. And an arc light went off just south of us. We'd actually, it turns out, run out of our AO just a little bit. And they put in an arc light, and I remember holding on to a tree because the ground was jumping and shaking. You thought it was like you were being in an earthquake, and had to hold on to trees to keep from bouncing down the mountain. But that was, as it turned out, a good thing, because it scared the hell out of the NVA, and they all took off. And we got out when the sun came up, we got out that day.
That's one of the more hairier stories I definitely remember in all of our correspondences, and especially compared to when you're going in heavy, that's a different story, and you're facing those odds and all that. But when you've got your 1-0, who is, he was, like you said, he's more of the recon guy. He's wanting to get in there and snoop and poop. But when y'all get found out tapping a wire, it pays to go in heavy like that.
Ruff was a good man. He was a little odd. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He had very certain ways of looking at things. But I learned a lot from him. But we had a guy come on the team, Giacomo, I think his name.
Yeah, James.
Young guy, kind of heavy. And Ruff was very big on PT also. And so every morning we went out and we'd do a 3 to 5 mile run with, carrying weapons and whatnot. And this kid could never make it. And he'd come huffing and puffing in after everybody else was back. And Ruff was getting ready to go on a extension leave. And he told the kid, he said, I'm going on extension leave. He said, when I come back, if you can't make the run, you're out of here.
Wow.
And so all the time Ruff was gone, I don't know where he got it, but he got some sort of sweatsuit kind of sauna suit or something. And he would go out in the mornings and he would start, Silky, that's one of our cats.
I'm doing the same with my dog.
She's got to know about everything that's going on.
Absolutely.
He ran once or twice a day the entire time that Ruff was gone. And he actually, I don't know how much weight he shed, but a good bit. And when Ruff came back, he made the run, no problem. And he turned out to be a pretty good recon guy.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard, and he's in again, guys, Jason Hardy's books have all of these great photos and the histories and all of that, and Mr. John's in a lot. I've got a few photos that I'll be sharing that he can speak about. But you guys should check it out. Mr. James is shown in a lot of these also, and yes, he is. He's a stout guy. I would call him a husky stout guy, and yeah, I could see if Mr. Newman told you to get in shape, you best listen if you're wanting to stick around. So,
well, yeah,
there's a few questions, if you don't mind. We
sure.
take just a few before we get into a little more Arizona and Texas talk. I knew this one was going to come up once his name was mentioned. Jason would like to know. He said, "Well, I'll let you read it if you can see it. If you."
Joe Walker. Yeah, I knew him well. He first time I met Joe Walker, I was in Bangkok at the Opala Hotel. That was a Thai name for his opera hotel. And Joe came into the hotel, and I don't know, somehow we got talking, and he found out I was from Platoon. And he got all excited. He said, I'm heading back to Vietnam. He had been up country. He was working in a CIA program in Thailand. And he said, "Oh, you got to come up to my room. I got to show you something." So went up to his room, and he opened the closet, and he pulled out a big parachute kit bag, right, and opened it up. And he had strings of mini grenades and 30 round, all kinds of stuff. And he said, "I'm taking this back with me." I said, "How are you going to get it back?" He said, and he pulled out and he had all these CIA stickers. They didn't say CIA, but they were like government stickers. So he boxed everything up, put these stickers on them so they wouldn't be opened by customs or the American post office, and had it sent all back to Platoon to himself. And then he went back and started up with California again. He was a character.
He is definitely one of there's a wonderful book, and I always mention it when I go on, or when a CCC vet's on, because more than likely they're mentioning it as well. And it's Uncommon Valor. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. And I just found out Michael Bentley went with Mr. Newman Ruff on that final that Halo jump.
Yep. Bentley. That was it.
Yep. It was driving me crazy, and I had to get it. But Uncommon Valor, guys, is a outstanding book, and it's got Mr. John. It's the complete and total history of CCC, and it is a wonderful book. But I remember when you told me that story of Mr. Joe, and that's Mr. Joe to a T, and what a recon man he was as well. Outstanding guy from all I've heard. Never got to meet him. I did send him a few messages, sadly, when he was getting sick, and he did get to see him. But
I talked to him. He was in bad shape, and that was a shame, because here was a guy that was a real physical fitness guy. Never smoked, didn't drink, did PT all the time. I mean, he was fit. I mean, the only guy I would say that was, Joe Walker was kind of a poster guy. The only guy that was more so was Bob Howard, probably. And
absolutely. It's and I mean, like you said, it's always sad when guys get sick in any shape and form, but whenever, and speaking of Mr. Joe, there's a nice photo of him when he got his car 15 shot up. But when like you said, he's running and gunning and doing all this stuff, and is using his mind and his body and all that, and then it's taken away from him, and it's just terrible. He's a good man.
I told my wife, if I ever come to that, just make sure I'm close to the gun cabinet.
Seeing my grandparents go through that, I've said the same thing. Either have some sort of medication or something to keep it, because that's being a prisoner in your own body, you know.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, here's one for we'll be getting into, but maybe we can jump into early.
Fun or interesting stories. Well, the Indigenous team members were all different, but they were. I mean, you got to remember the Indigenous team members. Most of them, by the time they got to the projects, MACV-SOG, and any of its peripheral projects like PRU or anything else, but these guys had been through, you know, the CIDG, the Mike Force. They'd been coming up the levels. So by the time they got to us, they were pretty experienced and had been around, around the block a bit. So, and then we were pretty selective about the guys who we took on. We didn't just take anybody on. They, usually had to be recommended. We kind of kept an eye on them for a while. We had to have them background checking so much as you could. And so by the time they got to our level, they were good guys. They were tough. They were fierce in a fight. And and they'd take you to the villages to whatever, weddings or some shindigs, and do their best to get you drunk on rice wine, because they thought that was the funniest thing in the world. See an American walk off the porch on a longhouse or something. But
many a good story in the log houses.
Yeah, interesting. We used to go up to Dock Toe, I'm sure you know, for Bright Light. Mm-hmm. And one time Texas went up there, and there was Bill Spurgeon, me, Ron Mattocks. I think it was just the three of us, American-wise. And we took the whole team, and we loaded up choppers with all kinds of guns and ammo and stuff we were going to carry up there. And when we were up in Dock Toe, we usually, Bill and I particularly, wore tiger stripe pants, black jungle sweaters, and we had the CAR-15s. We, of course, no markings, ranks, names, nothing. And of course, CAR-15s were kind of unique to us then, and all our gear looked odd. So, but there was a MACV compound not too far away, a few miles away, up on the hills, in the hills. And we used to go up there for breakfast. So we'd hop in a Jeep, drive up there, and the guys at the gate would kind of give us the eyeball and let us through. And we'd go into the mess hall. And it was kind of funny because we'd sit over by ourselves, and all the other people in the MACV mess hall would be, whispering back and forth and pointing at us. That was always kind of amusing. But
I've got a really interesting, and I've always, and especially since y'all it wasn't around all that long. We didn't talk much about CRP. Jason was wanting to know a little bit more on the CRP, other than besides the Sante situation and stuff like that.
Well, the CRP was made up, as I said, of the three teams, California, Hawaii, and Texas. And then we had a mortar section, which was Joe Walker's little 60 millimeter mortar. And we had, I'm trying to remember the armament. We carried about 6 RPDs. We had four or five guys that were RPG gunners, 4 to 6 RPG gunners. We had, I forget how many, we had a number of, we had several Molten Yards that were dedicated M79 gunners. And we had probably a dozen or 15 CAR-15s that were outfitted with grenade launchers. Everybody carried a teardrop round for the 60 millimeter mortar. So we had plenty of those. When the teams, because let's see, it was 12, 24, when the team was fully together, it was about 50 people. All three teams, plus the little headquarters element, plus the little medical section, plus the mortar section and so forth. When we, like I said, the only thing we carried was ammo and weapons. That was it. And personal first aid and stuff in the medical section. We didn't carry any food or anything else like that. If it didn't blow up or shoot, we didn't carry it. So it was a very focused sort of a group. Does that answer the question?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've got a few more, and then I've got some interesting questions that I haven't seen pop up yet, and they might. Let's see. I don't know if you dealt with anybody up north, but we'll see if we'll see for Zero Mike Foxtrot. If you can see that. If not, I'll read it aloud.
Yeah. I don't know who they were, but I don't know. I know Nick, but I don't know who they were.
Yeah, you got to remember, guys, he was at CCC, and CCN was way up north. The CCC guys were in the Central Highlands, messing with those tribes and interacting with them. They weren't they weren't close to the coast up there, so that was a whole different ball of yarn. But
the only time I was up north was when we launched from NKP, but that was the only times I was up north.
Oh, would you care to talk a little bit about the NKP launching process, because that's pretty unique?
Well, NKP was kind of unique, yeah. It was kind of funny in a way. I mean, when we would fly in, we'd fly in a C-130 Blackbird, and it would park down at the end of the runway, and then they came down there with what looked like a big, you know what a big bread truck looks like, like Wonder Bread or something like that. Yes. Well, they back it up to the ramp, and they had these things they'd swing out, and everybody'd run into the back of the truck. And then between the driver's section, where the driver and the passenger sat, they had this piece of plywood that was sticking up so nobody could see in the back. And the main concern was the molten yards, right? I mean, they saw Americans all the time in Thailand. But the molten yards was a different story. And so they had a special compound that we'd go there. It was the building was kind of a U shape with an interior courtyard that was fenced off. And then they had a big, I don't know how high it was, 8 foot or so chain link fence with concertina razor wire around it. And that's where you'd hang out until, you were inserted. But you'd go to briefings, and everything out of Thailand was run by the Air Force. So you inserted with Jolly Green Giants, and it was a very different. The first time I ever went to a briefing over there was very different, because it was like they were presenting to me, and they had these color photographs, high res for the time, color photographs of the LZs from multiple directions, looking west, looking east, looking south, and so on, all in color. And they're saying, we'll load up this way, and we'll do this, and we'll, and then they turned to me and they said, what's the latest you'd want to be on the ground? And I said, I don't want to be on the ground any later than at the very latest 3 o'clock, earlier if possible. So, and this is like a major or a lieutenant colonel asking me about this. And they're saying, okay, and they're making notes and everything else. So I thought, wow, this is great. So, but it was quite an experience, very different from in Vietnam.
That's a CCC Hatchet Force member, Mr. Terry. He was saying the CRP sounded like a mini Hatchet Force team.
Yeah, it was. Except, as I said, it was designed to be on the ground for hours as opposed to days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it was to be used for specific targets, for
mm-hmm.
very targeted purposes. And unfortunately, we didn't get to. We got called up on standby one time for a POW thing, and apparently a POW had escaped a hospital in Laos, an Air Force guy, they said, and he was running around, and the NVA were chasing him, and the PATH at Lao were chasing him, and he was running around. So they put us on. We were up at Dak To, and they put us on standby. We had the Air Force choppers, their gunships, everything was there. We were ready to go on a moment's notice. The only thing that was missing was they were trying to grab this guy so he could tell them where the hospital was. All right. Because the intent was to hit the hospital, just go directly in on it. And they chased him for, I don't know, a couple days. And they were up there in helicopters and O1s and O2s with bullhorns, calling out
Wow.
They never caught him. They figured the NVA scarfed him back up and figured he was so freaked out that he was running from everybody,
I can't even imagine. God almighty. Wow, this is interesting. This is from a poster, SOG in Vietnam, Retracing the Past. Howdy, America, from Saigon. Just wanted to let y'all know that there's still plenty of people here who think of y'all with nothing but gratitude. Nice. My mother-in-law being one of them, saying thank you to you, Mr. John.
I appreciate that.
Very kind words. Thank you for that. Thank you. Let's see here. Here's an interesting one. I always enjoy seeing what those of you that have made the transition from being a 1-2, 1-1, or what have you to a team leader. There's actually two good questions, but here's one of them. Oh, nope, that's another one. Right here. There we go.
That's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of when you're in a job or what, not necessarily military or anything, but and you have a boss, you say, oh, well, you can hardly wait till you make the next step. I can do that. I can. So suddenly, I became a 1-0, and we got a mission, and we went out, we trained, prepped for it and everything. We went out, got on the ground, we're all hunkered down, and I'm looking around, and I looked, and I realized everybody was looking at me, waiting for me to say what to do. So I thought, okay, so we went off, and everything was fine. But I came back, and I thought, God, what if I did the wrong thing? What if I told them to go the wrong way? Well, what if I'd gotten them all killed? And I don't even remember who it was, but his words or something I remembered all the rest of my life. We were sitting at the bar in Platoon, and I was telling him about it. I said, man, all of a sudden I realized all these people were dependent on, their lives depended on my decision. And he said, let me tell you something. He said, don't worry about it. He said, the worst thing is not to make a decision. He said, right or wrong, you have to make a decision. And he said, your people are well trained enough, and you have to have enough faith in them that in most cases, even if you make the wrong decision, they'll fight through it, But he said, the worst thing is not making a decision. And that's followed me through all my life. And I've sat in corporate boardrooms and watched these guys getting collectively millions of dollars a year, and they can't make a decision. They're passing it around like a hot potato, waiting for somebody else to commit, to make a decision. Make a damn decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, but make a decision. That has always frustrated me so much.
And the good second part with that, did you have any what personally what let you know you were ready to lead, to be a 1-0?
You know, I never went
the Indig, or
I don't know. I always had a good relationship with the Indig. I think it was made by somebody else, frankly.
wow. Okay.
I mean, I never went to 1-0 school.
Wow.
I don't know how I missed out on that, but I just was running all the time on, you know, and just so somebody at some level said, we think he's ready, and Bill Spurgeon said, I'll take him. And then, as I said, there was that overlap period before he left and right after I got there, and I guess I passed muster.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, like you said, someone had faith in you. And the second part, you know, you're not the first, you know, you won't like me saying this, but wonderful 1-0 that didn't go to 1-0 school and what was one of the best, you know, 1-0s that SOG ever had. That, you know, in my opinion, and probably numerous other people's opinion, you know, you got 1-0. Well, you got 1-0 school, much like Ed Walkoff and numerous other guys from your 1-0s and on the ground running missions. So I've always been curious about that, how guys like y'all ended up missing it. But there again, y'all are running recon.
Yeah, I remember, you know, one time when Ruff wasn't there and Mike Wilson and I were the only one there. And it was in a period we were very short-handed. For some reason, there were a ton of missions, and Wilson and I were, you know, it was kind of like brief a mission, prep for it real quick, go on the mission, come back, debrief, take a couple days, prep for the next mission. And it was just going like that, you know, one after another. And it was almost a blur. It was and in fact, and then when things started calming down a little bit, the Recon Company commander, what the hell was his name? Anyway, he came over. We were getting off a helicopter, just getting back, and we were frazzled. I mean, we were stretched thin like piano wire. And he said, "I'm sending you two on a CCK flight. You guys need to take a break." So we said, "Okay."
Can't pass up that. That's and could you actually explain to the?
Turned out to be the shortest CCK flight on record.
Would you mind explaining, because we've actually never had anybody actually go on, or I'm sure they've gone on but not actually mentioned CCK flights. Could you explain a little bit about CCK?
Yeah, CCK stood for a place in Taiwan, an air base in Taiwan that was south of Taipei. I can't think of what the actual name was, but the Blackbirds, the C-130s and whatnot that flew for SOG, periodically had to go back there for maintenance. So there was a deal cut that said that whenever they went back, a certain number of SOG people would go with them. And what they did was they cut us TDY orders, authorizing civilian clothing, and that, and the orders were cut in such a way that they were open-ended, because they, as long as the plane required some maintenance, then you were on leave in Taipei. Mm-hmm. And then when the maintenance was done, then you came back. Usually it averaged, I don't know, 6 or 7 days, I think. Mm-hmm. I remember the longest I think I recall hearing, there was one that was there almost a month.
Ooh.
Which was, and ours ended up being about 3 or 4 days, I think.
Wow. I mean,
it was a nice break.
Absolutely. I when I first heard about those and saw some pictures of some of the recon guys sleeping on the way to Taiwan. I was like, oh, that looks like that's a little interesting tidbit. And I've got this photo up, and I'm actually looking at one of another photo that I've got a question about, but this is from one of the viewers, and this is I get this asked a lot, but you can answer this better than anybody. Finally,
so very few people wore tiger stripes. I used to wear tiger stripes, the pants, to sleep in, and then we used to wear tiger stripes, around the compound or out on bright light maybe, but never wore tiger stripes in the field. What we did was we wore customized jungle fatigues that were tailored. We had extra pockets on them with zipper and all over the place, that tucked in instead of hanging loose. And we had a bunch of different spray paints, black, green, browns. So what we'd do is a person would stand there and we'd take these spray paints and spray them as you turned around. And then you'd put on your equipment and they'd spray that, your rifle, your harness gear, everything. And it actually made better camouflage. I could show you something. I don't know if you'd be able to see it, but those, you can see there, a pocket sewn on my shoulder there that had a zipper on it. But all that different shadings, that's all different spray color paints. Let me see if let me get something.
Absolutely. This is the guys got very creative. I've got some photos. Jim Shorten's got some guys that he literally they just lay out and would spray paint some really cool patterns. And I'll show y'all some of his local patrol gear. I've got a question I've got to ask, but this is before he's got his Browning right here.
Did you see that at all?
Yes, we can. Let me put that on the full. Look at that. There you go. Oh, yeah. Wow.
That's my loadout.
Wow. Okay, guys, you were seeing it right there. That's what he was wearing, and that, not the exact, of course, but that's as close as you're going to get to seeing what an authentic SOG loadout looks like right there in person.
So when I put that set of web gear and everything together, I was having a custom sheath made for a karambit knife for the up here. And so this guy said to me, he was making it out of Kydex. He said, "Oh, you're going to have to bring your web gear." And I said, "I got to see how it fits and everything." So I took that set of web gear in, and this was a tactical shop, police shop on one side, tactical and guns on the other. I carried it in and caused a little bit of a stir. A bunch of people gathered around and they're looking at it and they're saying, "Oh." One guy came up and he said, looked at it and he said, "Oh, that's old school."
That's you've definitely got some and as a matter of fact, one of the viewer that was a question early on your use. Would love to see that question. Yep, I've just gotten to that. There's several guys I know there's one guy in here that is doing RT Texas reenactment recreations, and he's watching. But there was another question that I was about to ask. Oh, no. Yes, actually, I was going to ask about this because I don't have the downloaded thing. Let me pull this photo down to where you can see the full thing. Let's see here. Was this your party suit, or what exactly was that right there?
Oh, that's the black nylon jacket. Is that Hardy's picture?
Yes, sir. That would be Jason's.
That was a 1-0 jacket.
Oh, that was the 1-0.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
on the right side, it had the team patch. On the left side, it had my code name Roadrunner, and every 1-0 got one, but you had to be a 1-0 to get one.
Okay. And how did you go about getting was Roadrunner assigned, or did you get to pick Roadrunner?
No, you picked your own code name. So like Jim Shorten with the carrot top, because he had red hair. But
the wild carrot. There's a great photo of Glenn, you, and Mr. Bill Spurgeon and Don Green right there.
Yep.
Texas days right there.
Yeah.
Mr. Glenn's granddaughter is going to be watching this, and she's was wanting to hear a little bit about RT Texas, which I'm sure we'll get to here in a bit. Trying to find some good questions before we go on to some others. Oh, here's one. Here's a good one. This one's always interesting. I think you've had some interesting wildlife.
Yeah. Well, I got bit one time on the inside of my left thigh by a centipede. My pants had ripped, so I had them kind of semi-pinned together. And we were sitting there, and all of a sudden it felt like somebody put a hot poker on my thigh. And of course we're in the bush, so I'm wanting to holler, and I can't, so I'm just cursing under my breath, and they're going, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And we see this thing crawling away, so we killed it. And I had this big spot on my leg where you could see where it bit, and it was all like white, puffy white around.
Oh,
kind of red. Well, what are you going to do? You know, so I took some Benadryl and whatnot, and I don't know, put some Neosporin or something on it, and that was pretty much it. And we got back to the compound, and I went to the medics, and they had a look, and they said, and in the dispensary all around, they had these big jars full of formaldehyde with different snakes and bugs and whatnot in them. And he said, "Was it one of those?" And here was one of those big centipedes or millipede or whatever it was. He said, "You don't have any bee allergies or anything like that, do you?" And I said, "No." He said, "That's probably good." He said, "You'd probably be dead if you did."
Oof.
And then, well, one night we had a tiger. We were looking for some NVA artillery positions along the border. We could hear them. And one night we were in RON, and we had a tiger that was circling in our camp. You could hear him coughing and gruffing. And for some reason, I kept thinking, I was sitting with my back up against a tree, and I thought, and you could see his eyes, you know, and stupid things you think of at times. And I thought, well, if he comes running in, I'll climb the tree. And then the next morning, I thought, well, hell, he can climb better than I can.
Oh yeah.
And the other animal story I have, not a really animal, and this accounts for somewhat of my dislike of snakes, but when we were on that 4-man mission, Ruff, me, and the 2 Montagnards, we were up in the mountains, and we went to sleep, laid out. And I used to sleep. I had it was like a half poncho. So the bottom half was a poncho, and the top half was nylon with flannel inside. So, you know, you just flip it over you, right? But you had the poncho on the bottom to keep the damp and everything off. And I always slept with my Car 15 lying on my right side with my hand on the hand grip like that. Not in the trigger, but just loosely gripped there. And I was laying there. And when you're in the jungle, you never really go to sleep. You know, you're just kind of in a, I don't know, your senses are alert. And I was laying there, and all of a sudden I felt something on my left side, on my left arm. Now that was the side that I flipped over, so nothing could come in that way. And as I'm laying there, I felt something kind of going, like crawling across my chest. And I'm laying there, not breathing. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's a snake, a big snake. And so I lay there the rest of the night, holding my breath, just barely breathing, rock still, just laying there. And the next morning, the other guys started getting up and they're looking at me and I'm laid back and I'm going, snake, snake, snake. And they're going, sneak? What are you talking about? What? And all of a sudden they got the idea. I said, snake, snake. And so they all and all through the night I thought, well, let's see, I could jump up with my bow and I'm whacking. And then I thought, well, I'd probably chop my foot off. And I thought, if I shoot him, I'll either shoot somebody else or they'll all kill me not knowing what's going on. So I just lay there. And they whipped the poncho, the liner back, all poised to do something. There was nothing there. So it had apparently kept going, fortunately. But I always figured, I like to think that it was probably a big, heavy python, right? Just kind of going along. The only other thing it could have been was a big king cobra, but
I don't want to think about that at all. Oh, I've come across walking the dogs a few copperheads over already, and I'm not a snake person, and
no.
I know a few. As a matter of fact, there's a 1st Battalion 9th Marine in the comment section here that I know from Chicago, and he was talking about his contacts with water buffalo and all that, but I can't imagine y'all being out there with the snakes, the centipedes, and the stuff that looks like it belongs in Jurassic Park or something.
Well, we had one time where the team was going along, and this was RT Texas. And so we were going along. He could walk under things I had to crawl under. That's how little he was, just a little bitty guy. And he turned around to me and he pointed, he said, snake. So I looked over and we were going through some bamboo, and over on the side, probably about face level, right? There was this, I don't know if it was a Russell but it was a bright green pit viper, and it was wrapped around the bamboo and kind of wrapped around it and just kind of sticking out like that, and just hanging out in the sun because the sun was right on there. So he was just kind of sunbathing, right? So I just kind of moved over the other side of the trail, and I turned around to the next person and I pointed and I said, snake. And so, everybody's passing it down to the line. So when we got to our next break, Ronald Mattocks came over and he said to me, what was everybody saying sneak about? What were we supposed to be sneaking? And he said, no, dummy, it was a snake. He kind of went pale. He never saw it because he was looking around. Never saw it.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Wow, the guys are getting some really good questions here. One guy said, there's the Grenader. Somebody was talking about y'all's camouflage, and I just lost it. Gosh, guys, y'all forgive me. I've messed up. Let me get another question and I'll find it. Here is one about the weather that y'all are dealing with.
Oh. Never had a heavy contact in the rain. But the rain I don't know how to describe the rain. It was like you'd wear a poncho and you still got wet. I mean, it would come down in just buckets. There was no way to be dry. And immersion foot was the biggest danger, one of the biggest dangers. where your feet wrinkle. You know how if you stay in a bathtub or your feet in the water a long time, you get wrinkles. Well, immersion foot is where your feet absorb so much water, they start cracking open. And the problem is that you then get infection into the raw flesh. We had one guy that got it so bad he had to be medevaced to Okinawa. They thought he might lose a foot. So I've had immersion foot and I've had immersion hand too, where I flipped my safety to go to automatic and just my hands were so wet it just peeled a big hunk of skin right off it. And I had my safety cut down so I could just hit it and it would just flip around, right? So that's how soaked you'd get. So the rain could be a problem, but I guess perhaps the benefit of it was the NBA didn't like it any more than we did, so they tended to stay in too, you know. Mm-hmm. But it could get pretty nasty.
Yeah, when the rain hit, as I've kind of picked up, it was unofficial truce. You know, everybody went to ground and tried to get dry, so to speak. And
the other problem was that they would have a mission, and so in the rain they'd wait for some cloud cover to open up. So they'd say, okay, and boom, and they'd stick you in a hole in the clouds, right? Well, then it'd close back up. So then the problem becomes waiting for an opening so you can get out. All right. And Bill Spurgeon and I don't think it was Texas, on a team he was on before that, but they got trapped like that. And they ran out of food. Everybody had immersion foot. That was the one where a guy had to be medevaced because they thought he was going to lose his feet. So I don't think he did, but I think they were all right. But there was nothing you could do for it. All you could do is wear flip-flops and let your feet dry out. That was basically the cure.
Wow. I mean, I've spoken to, I don't know, I think Mr. Joe Messer was there when you were around. I can't remember. He was on several teams, but he ended up getting medevaced with immersion foot. He was out 14 days and hit the skin of his feet when he took his boots off. Just all of it just came straight off.
It was bad. It was bad. It could be bad. I mean, that's why, one of the things I always carried in a plastic wrap up was a lot of extra socks. That was one thing. I mean, it was extra, took up extra room and everything, but it was the kind of thing that,
coming well handy.
Yeah.
This was funny. I've seen pics of a peace sign that got spray painted on the back of an Indig. Hell, well. Yeah, they definitely had some really, really fun, really neat spray paintings jobs. Some of the guys were pretty dang good at drawing and pretty dang artistic at that as well. Wow, we've got some good ones here. Which one's gonna go? Since you're talking about being in the field, we'll get this one. This is a really good one. About how long does it take to set up and RON? What makes some RON spots better than others?
Well, generally on an RON, it would depend on a lot of things in terms of, how secure you felt, what the area you were operating in was like, whether it was what kind of canopy. Was it thick jungle, or were you in triple canopy where it was pretty wide open? It depended a lot on the terrain and everything else. But generally, in picking an RON, you would try to scout out a place that you felt was okay, but not go to it and bypass it, or circle around and go somewhere else, and then wait until you were sure that nobody was following you, and then double back to the chosen location. And usually we set up in a somewhat circular formation. If we're putting out claymores, we would put them out and then turn them All right. So the back wasn't facing you. You would turn them 90 degrees to you. So the back was going to the left or right, whatever. And because the NVA would have a tendency, they'd snake up and turn them around on you. So you tried to put them in such a way that if they turned them around, okay, fine. It was just going the opposite direction, but it wasn't pointed at you. And then in the mornings, you'd usually wake up around first light and very carefully, check things out. First things we did when we woke up in the mornings after we were sure we were secure was we checked weapons. We all carried a oily rag, a toothbrush, and stuff like that. We'd do a little quick cleaning, make sure the weapons were ready to operate, set up some food, and then chart out where we were going that day. We actually woke up one day and we were all ready to move out, and we got run out by a wasp nest that we didn't know was there and was up above us, and chased us out of the area. And we got I got stung 3 or 4 times, and several other guys got stung pretty good.
Those are the ones that get you, and your face swells up like you got hit by a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one. Considering the firepower that y'all would go with, can you see that, or do I need to read it for you, sir?
Yeah, no, it's a grenadier. You mean yeah. We always generally we would have like on Texas, a typical loadout for us was we'd have two M79 gunners. We'd have an RPD. Ron Mattocks always carried an RPD, and then everybody else carried car 15s, sometimes with a grenade launcher on it, sometimes not. But that was fairly typical. And the grenadiers or M79 gunners, if you will, wore vests that they had M79 grenades in, and usually I think it was about 30 or 40 to a vest. All right. The radio operator on our team, I always gave the radio operator, having been a radio operator on a team, I always gave the radio operator an option, because carrying the radio plus a car 15 plus 15 mags or whatever, grenades and everything else, right? This guy, you had a load to carry, right? So I gave the radio operator the option of carrying a pump shotgun with a couple of bandoliers of shotgun shells to lighten his load a little bit. And some took it, some didn't, but it's up to them. I'll tell you a story about one team.
Yes, absolutely.
I took one team out, Wyoming. And so when I was meeting the team and we were getting organized, and I said, okay, my standard on my teams is that you will carry a minimum of 15 mags. You can carry as many above that as you want, but you'll carry a minimum of 15 mags. You'll carry 6 frag grenades, 2 Woolly Peter grenades, 2 smoke grenades, 1 Claymore, and I ran 1 2-pound brick of C4 and blah, 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 like that. So I ran them through all the 2 canteens, all this stuff. So I said, this is what you'll carry. And man, did I hear it. They were moaning, and I don't know what they carried before, but they didn't carry that. All right. And they were moaning and groaning, and oh no, that's too heavy. And oh. So I said, well, I don't care if it's heavy or not, you're going to carry it. And I'll check you before we get on the helicopter, make sure you got it right. So we went on a mission, and they told us before we went, they said, there's nothing in this area. Nobody's been in there in a while. We want you to go in and have a look around, poke around, see, but it's very quiet. Nothing's going on in there. So I said, okay. So then we went and walked off the LZ, and first thing we came to was a bunch of bunkers. Now, they didn't look like they were new, but nevertheless, they were bunkers. So we poked around a little bit, didn't see anybody, and we went on off and went on our way, and we went up this trail and came to this hilltop, a little hilltop, and we took a break, and we're kind of in a circular formation, and me and the 1-1, and also he was also the radio operator because we were the only two Americans, and we're sitting there, and I don't remember. I bent over to get something, and about that time, one of the yards screams, "NBA," and starts shooting, and the other American takes bam, 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 and the left shoulder just stitched right through, and over he goes. And the next thing I know is that stuff's going off all over the place. So we're on this little hill, we're surrounded. And the backside of the hill, as it turns out, was like a drop off. So we should have paid more attention when we got there. But so I'm bandaging up this guy, getting him sorted out, and calling on the radio, and nobody's answering the radio. We're calling out, "Mayday, Mayday," calling out call sign, prairie fire emergency, whatever. And I'm yelling at the yards, slow down, don't use up all the ammo in the first 2 minutes, right? And one yard throws a Willie Peter grenade, which bounces off a tree and explodes. And I look up, and all I see is an umbrella of white coming down. And I thought, oh my God. And I don't know, it was a miracle, but not a single person got touched by white phosphorus. I don't know how that happened. So anyway, I thought, well, this was one bridge one mission too many. This is the one that you're going to go down on. And I mean, we were stacking. I don't know if you've heard the term stacking magazines and straightening pins on the grenades, but
wow.
So all of a sudden, this voice comes up on the radio, and lo and behold, it was Larry White.
With six-pack himself.
Yeah. So he happened to have spotted some target of opportunity, and he had called in a bunch of A1E raiders, and had some other stuff coming in too. So anyway, I shot a flare off into the sky to give him our position. He picked up and pinpointed us, and they called up and they said, "How close do you want it?" And we said, "Danger close, as close as you can get without, and they did. They put it right almost on top of us. But I mean, we were okay. I mean, it shook us up a bit, but it scared the NBA and drove them back. So we were able to make our way to an LZ, and we ended up coming out on strings. I remember when I was the last one out, and the yards above me, your strings, you're supposed to be kind of like this, right? So you can hold on to each other, right? Well, the 3 yards were like this, and I was here, if you can see that. All right, so I was like 8 feet below them, From my head to the bottom of the feet was like 8 feet. And I was flapping around in the wind like an old dirty piece of laundry. My car 15 was slapping me in the face, and I'm holding on, trying to keep the things from twisting. And I'm cursing the helicopter pilot because he's flying much faster than he's supposed to. And some guy in a helicopter flying chase is alongside us going, "Hey," thumbs up. And I'm cursing him and just getting beat to hell. And so we finally got to this abandoned A camp along the border, which was the closest place they could set down at. And they sat down. Guy, very gentle, laid us down. And of course, riding strings, your legs go to sleep and everything. So I'm getting out, unbuckled and everything, slapping my legs, and I'm, trying, I'm getting up, and I'm storming off toward the helicopter, still cursing. And a couple of the guys come up to me and they say, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going over that pilot and I'm going to beat the crap out of him." And they said, well, they're saying, wait a minute. And as I'm getting closer, I'm watching the helicopter, and I see them. They're taking things off, pulling the M60s off, pulling the radio. Turns out they got shot hovering above us. They got shot up so bad, he was afraid that the helicopter was going to fall out of the sky. Hence, he had been going fast to get to some place so he could land with us. So I got to the helicopter, I stormed across the thing, and I got up to the helicopter, and the pilot turned around and I said, "Hell of a job, thanks."
Boy, that's pucker factor inducing right there. My God.
And one thing I have to say, the yards all later came up and said, "Oh boy," because not one of them came back with any leftover ammo or anything.
Wow. I mean, speechless on that. I mean, that is, wow. I mean, speechless. I'll have to even just go to the next question because I've got nothing more to even add to that. Jason.
Bright lights were the hardest missions because the enemy knew you were coming. Yeah, bright lights could be very difficult. I remember when Fat Albert went
Very
down.
good. Mm-hmm.
I was on the initial bright light for it. And it took us a couple of days before we could even try to get in. And I was in the first chopper, and then Mattocks and the rest of the team were on the second chopper. And we were coming into the LZ, and the Cobras were flanking us and firing their guns and rockets and just bringing all kinds of rain and hellfire down on them. And the fire from the ground was so heavy. I remember seeing two B-40s go underneath the skids of the chopper I was in. And finally the pilots broke off and said, "We can't get down there. We just can't get down." And it was several days before they were able to get a team in on the ground. By that time we were off bright light, moved on to something else. And they finally got a team on the ground, but they never found Fat Albert. But yeah, bright lights could be difficult because sometimes Doc Siang, when it was under attack, and we had a bright light, we had to bright light a downed helicopter crew, and they knew somebody was going to come after the crew, so they were just hanging out around, waiting on you. So yeah, bright lights could be difficult, but you go after your people. Yeah, I mean, we had a thing. The pilots always came for us, and we would always go for them. So that was
that. And Fat Albert's is a just terribly tragic, but also shows the bonds between the SOG men and their indigenous brothers, because he one of the yards were wounded, and Fat Albert stayed back. He told I forgot who his 1-1 was at the time. He told him to keep going to the aircraft. I'm holding them off, right. And he's going back, giving care, and all of a sudden they overtake him, and they're fighting to the very end until they finally hear the NVA come up on his emergency radio. And
I remember Fat Albert used to carry a mini grenade around his neck, and he said, "I'll never be taken alive."
I was hoping you would share that. That's one of the lores of Fat Albert. Yes, I was hoping you would share that. Just again, could you mention that again? What he would wear?
One of the little mini grenades on a cord around his neck, And he said he had never let them take him alive. Well, I mean, nobody wanted to be taken alive by them. It was
absolutely not. And I'm of the frame of thought, and especially from talking to men like you who knew him and reading about him and talking to John Plaster, I feel pretty sure he lived to that final thing he said, that he was not taken alive. So
must be Georgia.
Yeah. Let's see. There was we've got some down here at the bottom that are getting people are talking reenactors. Hang on one sec. Oh, while I'm looking, I actually wanted to show people because the sidearm question came up, and while this is actually coming up, let me find it so somebody can see it. Actually, here's a pistol one while I'm getting it ready. You can see
the Hush Puppy pistol. No, I'll show you what I use.
I've got a picture of it actually too. Y'all are in for a treat. I wasn't thinking he was going to do this, but he's going to do it. And I'm sorry, I got to keep it on the small screen so it don't freeze. Is he going to bust it out on us? He is. There it is. There it is. I was about to show this in that same exact picture. I was going to say, there he is in his kit and gear ready to go. And that is his Browning right there that he carried. And I was hoping you would share the story about your high power.
Well, the Browning, I carried it for a long time. I carried it both in a shoulder holster, and then I rigged. They didn't have drop holsters back then, but I rigged a thing to carry it. I carried this with 3 mags, 1 loaded and two spares. And the way I carried my equipment was in 3 layers, if you will.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So the first layer was the rucksack. I could drop the rucksack and keep going and not lose anything. Second layer was my harness and web gear. All right. If I'd used it up or whatever and I needed to get rid of it, I could drop it. The last layer was I had a boot knife, a large boot knife I carried, I had a buck knife on my belt, and this Browning was always attached to my body. So if I lost everything else, I had those things and I could carry on with those. But you always had to think in terms of if I lose this, what do I fall back on? So that was
your multi-layer gear, and I was glad you mentioned that right as the pistol, because the question was, what was your preferred sidearm? And I'm glad you actually showed it, because someone mentioned the 1911, and I was saying, oh no, you're in for a surprise when he shows you what he actually carried. And you can see in the photo, he's got his that's his shoulder holster he has, and I've got another one, but gosh, I just went blank on what I was about to say.
Well, in those days, unlike today, where everybody carries a sidearm, in those days, sidearms were considered to be officers' weapons, right? Now, we were a little different, so we did kind of what we wanted to, and we could pick any sidearm we wanted to carry, and my choice was the Browning.
That's what it was. The 3-layer system, I was glad for you to finally show, because people are always used to seeing all of y'all fully kitted out and everything. And, you get mentions of people carrying stuff in their pocket or their breast pocket and all that. But you were the first person to explain to me in detail when I was first asking about the gear and what you would do in a certain situation. And you described the 3-layer system of, you need to have something on your person to where you can kill, survive. And also if you run out of ammunition, you need a knife to where you could kill or survive with it as well. So you've got your
Yeah, and you usually carried at least one meal in your pants pocket. You know, you always kept your map and your compass and things like that on your person. You know, first aid items you tried to keep on your person. You know, so those kinds of things that were immediately necessary for if you lost everything else, they were attached to you. You know.
Absolutely. That was very, very informative, because I was just used to guys, you know, you're not ever gonna get loose to your gear, but no, that's not the case at all. Oh, we got some really good questions. We'll do this one before it's another 1-0 question. This one's interesting.
Without knowing you were there. Oh. That's a good. When Ruff and I went on that mission in Cambodia, we were literally in an NVA division rear area, and we were right beside a high-speed trail, lying in the bushes. Probably, I don't know. I'm looking at this room thinking it's probably that distance, so maybe 30 feet. All right. And we hadn't made radio contact with the covey. So he was over us, and he started cutting his engine. He'd be, and then he'd cut the engine, and then he'd go, and then he'd cut the engine, which was a signal usually that they want you to make contact. Well, 25, 30 feet away, there was this group of NVA that were standing there talking, and they were talking about us. And they were talking basically about the fact that they knew we were there, but they couldn't find us, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And we're just laying there quiet in the brush, watching them. And this guy and then they started talking about well, why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? You know? And so took the little survival radio, and it had a Morse code key on it. And so I started tapping out "Covey, go away" or something, you know, to that effect, right? And at Longhorn, this guy was I can't remember who it was. He was a radio guy, and he was sitting in there, you know, kind of feet up on the desk, leaning back, reading a book or something. And he heard this stuff, and he said, I sat up and he thought, that's Morse code. And he started listening and realized what it was. And he called Covey and said, you got to go, leave them alone, they can't talk. And then Covey took off.
Wow, that's the first time I've ever heard Morse being used to save your tail in that shape and form, I should say.
I think that's the only time that I ever actually used Morse code.
So how close do you think
in FTXs?
So how close do you think you were? 10, 15 feet probably?
Oh no, probably 20, 25 feet.
Ooh.
Maybe 30 feet. It was, but we could see them very, very clearly.
Oh,
but it was just, there was some brush in front of us. Well, actually, there was one time. Well, no, these guys knew we were there, so that wouldn't count.
Wow.
They didn't survive the meeting.
I was about to say, I imagine they didn't get too far to tell how close y'all actually were. Here's an interesting one. Any tips on being a 1-0? Things you learned in the field, tips on losing NVA trackers, etc.
Depended on the type of tracker.
Dogs are always, I do get questions about dogs in here.
If they were using dogs, which they did sometimes, and you could usually hear them, then we'd usually, which I hate to do it to dog, but we'd sprinkle CS powder along our back trail. So if they come sniffing along, they take one sniff and they were done. That was it. They weren't.
Oh yeah.
Barefoot trackers, we call them. They were Montagnards who were frequently working against their will with the North Vietnamese, sometimes not. Sometimes they were from the northern tribes up in North Vietnam, but they were very skilled trackers, and they usually were literally barefoot, or maybe sandals with loincloths and whatnot. They carry an AK and a pouch of extra ammo around because the NBA didn't wholly trust them. So they'd put them out in front. And these guys would track you across bare rock. They were pretty good. So usually the only way you could get away from them was to kill them. So you didn't really get away from them in that sense. Another way to deal with trackers or people that are following you was to button hook or fish hook. It depends on, people call it different things. That's where you're coming along, you send some people ahead to deliberately leave a trail while others get off the trail and come around and set up an ambush. So the people who are tracking you continue to follow these guys up here, wherever they are, up here. And they keep following until they pass the ambush site, and then you ambush them. So different, depends on the situation. And sometimes you just outrun them.
Did you have any, this one hasn't come up, it does come up though. Did you have any nifty tricks, Claymore tricks, or other than CS that you, for the dogs that you would do on the NVA or the barefoots, other than just straight up annihilate them on an ambush?
Yeah, most of it was pretty straightforward. There weren't too many tricks.
Just get around them, come back, and wipe them out.
Yeah,
that's trick enough.
Yeah.
This one's always interesting, and I can only from pictures I've seen of you, I'm not going to answer for you. I feel sure.
They ask about previously about any tips as a 1-0.
Yes, sir. Tips.
And I would go back to what I said before. If you're ever in a position of leadership, management, or whatever, and something comes up, and I use this my entire life. All right. Don't be afraid to make a decision. The worst thing you can do is vacillate and take in input, listen to everybody, be willing to, but at the end of the day, make the decision, because you're the boss, the manager, the leader, whatever, and people are looking to you to make the decision. Not every decision you make isn't going to be right, but you need to make, a leader makes decisions.
Absolutely. And you can read in accounts in the SOG books of and the records of maybe inexperienced 1-0s or timid 1-0s that, like you said, didn't make decisions, and the entire team paid the price. And like you said, make a decision, move, and don't just sit there. We've got two good questions. I know one, I like I said, I'm not going to answer for you, but I feel pretty sure it's a yes. But how were your M79s? Were they cut down like Tilt and the guys, or like we all see, or?
Our M79 gunners had regular full-size M79s.
Okay.
They tended to take, those ladder sights they had. They tended to take those off because those things just got caught and stuff. But the M79 guys the thumpers were used more as a sidearm as much as anything. They weren't a primary weapon. All right. So the M79 gunners, that was their job. They were practiced and they were expert with that M79. And I would take them to the range, and I would point at targets, I would say, hit this, hit that, hit this. And they would, just as fast as I could give targets and reload, they go boom, 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 and they'd hit it. So that's what you want in an M79 gunner. The thumpers, that's a little side, some guys carried them, some guys didn't, some guys cut down other things, just depended, but they weren't a primary weapon.
I've heard some, not horror stories, but some training pain stories about when some of the some recon guys, and one specifically, FOB one hatchet force leader, got a group of Cambodians, and they like to use the M79s with the HE and the buckshot like shotguns. They didn't bloop them and loop on the targets. They would just straight up fire on you and then just blow you away. So I had to teach them how to bloop them over and actually use them as they were meant. So I always think of that.
You got to be careful of that cut down stuff too, because it weakens the barrel, and sometimes you can have a bad a split barrel or something like that, from the explosion. And
if you don't cut it down properly, like you said, and also if you don't have the correct person using it, you can have a bad time with one of those things. Bad time. That was the one I was looking for, and I'm always curious about it because I had actually read about this in a SOG biography. I'll let you read that, sir, since
someone wrote about always taking the round out of his chamber before sunrise and placing it with fresh. Anyway, took the round out of his chamber before sunrise. Oh, I see what he's saying.
Sleeping with a round in and taking that.
That goes with what I was saying before. That one of the first things we did in the morning was rifle maintenance. So you'd take the magazine out, remove the cartridge, clean, wipe down, put a fresh one, and so on, right? Yeah, you can do that. But you did it in a rotating fashion so that, I would do one and this guy would do one, then we'd kind of the next two, and then, so not everybody at once.
And what was and there's another one that's going to be tying into this. How during y'all's RON, or when y'all would be out long enough to be sleeping, what was y'all's percentage of security? Were y'all always 100%, 50, 75? How low would y'all go, depending, or would it just literally depend on how y'all felt?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of, depended on how you felt, but one guy awake is enough. You don't have to have half the team. Let me tell you, a lot of people don't realize that we were in the jungles, but we were in the mountain jungles. So a lot of our trekking was up and down hills and mountains. All right. It wasn't like on flat ground all the time. I mean, there were areas where it was flat, but we spent a lot of time going up and down mountains and traversing mountains. And that's hard work. You're carrying 80 plus pounds of equipment, maybe 100 pounds in some cases. And it's hot and humid. And it beats you down. So, I mean, now on the plus side, we were all super fit, for.
Oh yeah.
But you need your rest. That's why we took fairly frequent breaks. All right, to keep reasonably fresh in hard circumstances. Right. You'd go so far, you'd count off so far, and then you'd take a 10-minute break or 15-minute break or whatever, and then you'd keep going, but at night, I wanted people to get rest. Conversely, we didn't smoke in the field. All right. I carried all the cigarettes, after the first contact was made, I'd pass them around. It didn't matter then. knew where we were. But yeah, no, I wanted, depending on the area, the situation, how we felt, we might have a couple of people that would stay awake and we'd trade off around, right? But I wouldn't have, half the team up all night.
Wow. All right. This is actually. Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And guys, this is looks like you're coming in off a mission. You've actually got some beard growth coming, and still all smiles though. So I take it everything went well.
I guess I'm happy to be back. Probably got in trouble. Looks like I'm glad I survived. Look,
absolutely. Looks like the guys back there are getting off. I see a RPD, and they look fairly happy. So it looks like everything went pretty well. I don't think this was covered earlier, James. This might have been answered, but how close did you ever get with air power?
The closest was that time on a hilltop, where I put a flare straight up so they could tell where we were, and I gave them a range out from that flare, and they dropped 500 pounders in very, very close, and but it saved our butts, so I can't complain.
No, you're still here.
I told everybody when we heard them coming in, I just told everybody to get flat on the ground and keep your head down, and we did, and we got through it.
I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, the literally the earth shaking underneath you. I mean, thank God for American air power like that. Jeez. This is one of my favorite photos of you actually back there with the Hatchet Force sign back there behind you rappelling. Looks like you're in full gear too, actually.
Well, the rappelling tower was I got some stuff on. Was one of our regular workouts. When we would go on a run in the morning, and our runs were cross country. We would do a sprint, walk, run paces across country, right? Down along the river, and then we'd get on the road coming from Pontoon, and it was about a mile. And we'd come up the road and we'd run in formation doing rifle drills, right? And when we got back, we'd go to the rappelling tower and we'd do PT there. So we'd do some regular, push-ups, set-ups, all that kind of stuff. And then the last thing we'd do is on the side of the rappelling tower, there was a ladder hanging down, the kind that they rolled off the helicopters for you to climb up in. One of those aluminum with steel cable ladders. Well, it was hanging off the side. So the last part of PT in the morning was you had to climb the ladder twice, and once to warm up and the second for time. And we had not the point man could do it in 19 seconds. And that was like a 60-foot tower.
Man, boy, I bet it's, I mean, people don't really think about it, they just think of the stories y'all out there humping it and, getting in gun battles and all that. And they don't think about, it's not y'all coming home, and just drinking beer all day and all that. Y'all are working. I mean, y'all can't just be out there kicking ass and doing that, sitting around drinking beer all day. Y'all are working.
Yeah. Every day you would, you had something that you would be doing. If you were in the compound, you'd be doing weapons stuff, or you'd be going to the range, or you'd be doing maps, or drills of some sort. I mean, you trained for something different every day. When you went to the range, and we went to the range a lot, you trained in what we called IA drills, and you would try and think of every situation that, if they hit us from here, if they hit us from there, if they hit us from there, how are you going to react to that? And you'd practice that over and over. And we always practice live fire, live rounds, live grenades.
Okay, that folks are very interested in that. Now, is this around the time, if I'm not mistaken, didn't y'all actually have a skeleton or a crashed helo to where y'all could practice getting on, getting off, and all of that during IA drills or and stuff like that on the compound?
Yeah, they had one at one point. So we'd get the helicopters out on the helicopter pad too. If they didn't have something hot going on, we'd have them go up and we'd practice rappelling off the helicopters, doing what they call today fast roping, right? Except we didn't have as good of ropes as they have today, or as good of certain stuff. So you had to be I've seen guys come off with smoke literally coming off their gloves, right? And if you didn't have, you had to wear a couple of layers of gloves, because if you didn't, you'd burn right through to your hand.
Wow. Man, oh man! I mean, yet again, this is why y'all were able to do what y'all were able to do. This is actually a very interesting question.
A good debriefing story. Okay, I'll tell you one. There was one time they called us in, and they said, "We want you to go into this area. Nobody's been in a while, but it's very quiet, nothing there. But go in and have a look." So we looked up the area, checked it out. We thought, well, you know what? Let's take everybody. We'll go for an outing. So we had myself, Don Green. Don Green was a radio operator. Ron Mattocks was the 1-1. Woody, what the hell was he saying? I can't remember, but he was along. Ron Mattocks and Woody were both carrying RPDs, and we had, I don't know, let's see, at least 8 Montagnards. So there was a bunch of us, at least 12 of us, right? So we come off the LZ, and within 50 feet, the point man says, "Runner," and he points, and we can see where somebody, an LZ watcher, had taken off running, right? Didn't think much about it, because it was not an uncommon thing. So we continued on, and we were coming down this little wash, and we looked up to the side, and I said, "That looks like lean-tos and stuff." So we went up. It looked deserted. So we went up, and we're looking around. Sure enough, there were these lean-tos and little structures around. So we're exploring around, taking pictures with the pin double cameras the Intel people gave us. And I'm walking along, and I see this trail. And I said, "Oh, look, a trail." And as we got closer, it got bigger. And as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, it was a road. And it had banks on it that were probably about 6 inches where it had been graded, right? And overhead, it had netting. And we said, "Holy mackerel, nobody knew this was here." So we're taking pictures of it and everything. And all of a sudden, we hear some noises. A lot of live, chickens and whatnot, some people coming toward us. So we get back. There was some flat ground, and it dropped down into with a bunch of brush in front of it. So we dropped back there and spread out. And I said, "Nobody fire unless I fire." So we're laying there, and a point element, I don't remember, 8, I think about 8 or 9 NVA, pith helmets, nice crisp uniforms. These guys were sharp. And they come out, they kind of spread out into the area where the lean-tos are and kind of looking around, and they come and he walk right over and stop about 5 feet, 10, some of them 10 feet away, but they were very, very close. And so POW, my 01, and I were laying right next to one another, and everybody down, looking down the line, and everybody is, and this one guy, this one NVA, as he turned, he clicked his safety off. As he was turning away, he clicked his safety off down to on his AK. And when he did that, we knew, and we opened up, the whole line opened up on him. And so anyway, I sent some M79 guys, and we hosed down the people in the back and put some smoke and gas and HE on them and whatnot. And we took off. And Don got injured as we were leaving. He twisted his ankle really badly. So I had to take the radio from him. He couldn't carry it, and so we're limping along. So we called in, and I know this is a long way to get to a debriefing story, but long story short, we called, got evacuated and back to Pontoon. Went in, and we sat down for the debriefing. We went over the maps, we showed them everything, told them what happened and everything. And of course, as soon as you get there, you turn on the cameras and they go in and develop them. And the guy comes in, one of the intel guys, he said, "Now, what did you say happened?" And I told him, and I told him about the road and everything. And he said, "Well, there's no pictures." I said, "What do you mean there's no pictures? It's your camera. You set the settings. I don't mess with them." And he said, "Well, there's no pictures." And you got the distinct impression, the way they came in and talked, that they didn't believe us. They thought we were lying. And which really upset me and the other guy. And so about 2 days later, I was walking across, I was heading toward the mess hall, and this lieutenant stops me from the hatchet force. And he asked me, he says, "Can you show me on the map where you went in and everything?" And I said, "Sure." And so I pointed out the LZ we used, and I traced kind of where we went and where the action had taken place. And I asked him why. And he said, "Well, we're going to take a platoon or a reinforced platoon in and kind of check out the area." And I said, "Well, if you'd like," I said, "me and I'll bring a couple of my yards, and my one will, I'll bring 3 or 4 of us." I said, "We'll go with you and we'll lead you in." And he said, "No, we don't need you. We don't need you." And then I said to him, I said, "Well, okay. But I said, if I were you, I wouldn't land on the same LZ we used. I would use a different LZ and walk into the area." And he got very huffy because I was telling him what to do and whatever. And he said, "Oh, I don't need your advice on this, And I said, "Fine, you do what you're going to do." So the platoon went in. They went in, unfortunately, late in the day. They got hit that night and almost wiped out. I think they took 85% casualties before they were able to get out of there the next morning. So
Jesus. I mean, did that happen often? I mean, to where I know the intel guys were notorious for that, for thinking y'all were bullshitting, for, excuse my language, but for another recon man or hatchet force leader to not believe you were, I mean.
He was a young lieutenant and hadn't been there very long, so.
Oh, God.
But I mean, frequently when we had in the past, we reported tanks. Tanks being found. No, tanks couldn't be up there. Before Long Bay got overrun, recon people reported tank tracks and stuff. No, tanks can't be up there. Long Bay was overrun by tanks, So it happened. All the intel people, would say poo-poo things because it didn't fit their narrative.
Literally took until a pipeline and tanks drove up on their particular bases in the open until they believed y'all. I mean, ridiculous. I mean, hell, there for a while. Excuse my language again. They didn't believe that the NVA were using elephants as beasts of burden until one of y'all put down a convoy of elephants and brought back some tusk for them and elephant dung and said, "Here, will you believe it now?" and dumped the turd and the tusk on his desk and said, "Tell me what that is then, sir."
Yeah, there was a little bit of
and speaking of, while we're on ramps, this is another good question, and I'm sure you've got one for us. We've got a few more questions and we'll be done for the day. We're already to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that he was a REMP exactly, but he was from the 25th Infantry Division. He was down in the TOC. I forget what his excuse for being there was, but he was, I don't know if he's an S3 or whatever he was. And I was down there for something, and I was talking about something, and I don't remember the specifics, but he basically challenged it and said he didn't, well, that's not right, that's not true, that's whatever. And I got really PO'd with him, and so I said, I turned to him and I said, "Get your rucksack." I said, "You got so much going on." I said, "I'll take you in the next time I'm in." And, and he was like all puffed up and the major, who was the S3 or whatever, he turned and he basically told the guy to back down. He said, "You don't want to do that. You don't want to go in."
I love that. Yeah, you're barking up the wrong tree, my friend. Here's another good one. We've got one or two more questions. We've already gone well past, but I mean, we've had more viewers on this episode than we've had on any other. But here's a good one, and I think this may actually be a club shot that we're looking at. that can be shared. Statute of limitations might be in effect. The ones that aren't still in effect.
Well, I mean, regular nights at the club were pretty regular. I mean, guys drank, but very few. Not that many people got drunk, unless there was some specific party or something going on.
Martha showing up, or
something special going on. But we would sit around, we'd talk tactics, what happened on the last mission, stuff like that. Shoot pool in the back or whatever. Sometimes there was a movie, but I remember one time after the what was the operation? That went into Laos, and
was it Tailwind?
Tailwind. Mm-hmm. And so when Tailwind went in, and we were up at Bright Light for a while for Tailwind, and I remember counting body bags that they were offloading, and there were more body bags than there were guys going. Right? And I said, "That's not a good sign." So anyway, when it was all over, and of course it was Marine choppers, right? Jolly Greens and whatnot. And they were used to SAR, search and rescue kind of stuff, right? And when it was all over, we had a big party in the club. I don't know why I keep saying pub. And it got pretty raucous. But I remember one of them leaning over, and he said, "Don't you guys ever invite us back here again." He said, we don't want to ever see this place again."
I love that. That's I I've heard a few stories of that. Heck, the 219th CEO had to get his headhunter Spaff boys off the Pontoon compound from living with you guys because he thought you were too
We were
bad of an
bad
influence.
yeah.
Way too bad an influence for y'all.
Yeah.
And before we close it out, I've got a few photos that I'd like to show some guys of and maybe actually real quick here is I just found this. This is Joe Walker and Ron Gravitt on a CCK flight.
Oh yeah.
And there you got Joe Walker dead asleep and Ron looking at saying, why on earth are you taking a photo of me right now? And the boys loaded up. Either it looks like they may be on the way or Joe's wiped out. He may be tired and on the way back to Pontoon.
Yeah.
And then
Ron
this is
that. He was a piece of work.
That he was. He was a character.
Kenny Rogers.
Kenny Rogers.
You ever see him? You ever see him in before he passed? He had the silver hair and the beard and.
Oh wow! I did not see him before he passed.
I'll tell you, he was a spitting image of Kenny Rogers.
The gambler. I'll have to remember that. That's hilarious.
Pat Lucas.
Yep, you and Pat. That's another one of my favorites.
Cool Hand Luke.
Cool Hand Luke. Where were y'all at? Is this on top of the?
We were sitting on top of the bunkers, what we call the beach.
Okay. I've seen some other guys up there. I think Eugene McCarley one time, but by far you guys are definitely enjoying yourselves more so than anybody else.
How skinny I am there.
Oh yeah.
I'm 6'3" and I weighed about 160 pounds.
Wow. I mean it'll run you ragged. I mean y'all see it, guys. I mean it takes a lot out of you. And here's another really a favorite because not only the gear in it, but you back there looking cool as a cucumber in your jungle boots with your aviators on. I don't know if you've got your Rolex on or not, but you got Larry Purvis and Paul Schoenberg with you.
Yeah, Paul Schoenberg. Yeah.
Well, were you what were you doing? Are you on an off day or are you overlooking it?
It looks to me like they were probably coming back, probably meeting them at the helicopter pad.
Okay. That's a really
I get asked about it. Awful clean for coming back from a mission.
I was about to say, and he's kind of hiding his CSIO pith helmet behind his back a little bit, and was wondering about that. I've got a few photos here, and we'll end it. But I wanted the people to see some of your good photos that you've got. Here's one of my favorites. This is when you were early on. Look at all those mags he's loading. You always wonder how much ammo guys took out. He's sitting there in his sandals, just going to town, loading mag after mag after mag.
Yeah, initially we didn't have, all we had was 20-round mags. And then we started buying our own 30-round mags. And I got up to where I had like 4 or 5 30-round. I used to carry BAR belts, and I'd stick them in there, and then the rest of them I'd fill up with 20-rounders. And I'd carry a back-to-back 30 in the car 15.
Wow. Okay.
But we had to buy our own.
Yeah. I mean, that's along with the leggings, the first batch or the batches of the 30-rounders always come up and people's questions and wondering when and where they came about. And there's leggings, you guys.
I found a surplus store. My parents at the time lived in Arkansas. My dad retired from Little Rock Air Force Base, and I found an Army Navy surplus store down in Little Rock that carried those leggings. So periodically we'd take up a collection. I'd send them money. My dad would go down, buy all the leggings that they could buy, and then he'd ship them over to us, and And that's how we got a lot of those leggings.
Wow. And as far as I know, I've seen one or two Force Recon men wearing, but as far as I know, in SOG, CCC is the only group that wore the leggings, and it is very cool. It separates y'all, and as far as I have heard, they did their job and kept the leggings and all that out. I mean, the leggings out, kept the leeches and the bugs and all that out.
Yep,
so
they were very effective at that. Yep.
Yeah. And
we got them for yards and everybody.
Yeah, that's what I was very surprised and glad to see, that even the yards got to partake and get them some leggings as well. That was very neat to see their photos of them. I'm sure they thought they were cowboys in them.
Well, we tried to take care of our yards.
Absolutely. And to close it out, this is the Wild Carrot here. This is at one of the SOARs with Mr. John, and I'm hoping I went last year and the Wild Carrot was there, but hopefully everyone will be able to go this year. It looks like it's going to be an important year, but everyone's saying thank you, sir, for answering questions, spending time with us, and especially they're doing the reenactment group in Texas, and this is going to be a huge help for them, and everyone's thanking you. So if it's all right, maybe here in a month or so's time, if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to have you back on if you'd love to share and answer some more questions for us.
Sure. Just be sure to keep my story straight.
I will. Absolutely. All righty. Well, it looks like we're going to call it a day here. We've gone, wow, almost 2.5 hours. I didn't anticipate to go this long, but heck, when it's this interesting, you let it roll. So we're going to shut it down for the day, guys. I hope you all have a good afternoon. And Mr. John, all you have to do is hit the little button at the bottom, the leave studio button, and you can go. But before you go, is there anything else you'd like to say to the viewers before you go?
No, I enjoyed it. I'd be happy to come back sometime.
Thank you, sir. We definitely want you back. Everyone's already saying God bless, and we can't wait to have you back. So please, I'll definitely keep in touch with you and have you back, and I'll just be in touch with you here after a while, and I'll go ahead and close out the show,
okay.
And you can hit the leave studio button.
Okay.
See you later, sir. All right, guys, that was a wonderful show. Wonderful. And I apologize, we didn't keep it full screen, but as you could tell, when I would go from picture to just me and him, it would freeze his image. So I kept the picture up for the majority of the time. That way we could at least see him talking. I know it was minimized and all that, and that's a bit of a bummer. But, you know, at least we got it, you know. And thank goodness that little test run worked this morning, because we initially thought we were going to have to use the phone method, which was going to be a real pain in the rear. But looks like we've got it set up, firing on all cylinders here. So I'm pretty stoked. Brady, great questions. Brad, all of y'all, wonderful. James, great questions. Yeah, man, he was just a little bit early for DB. I'm sure he heard rumors. All of the CCC guys heard rumors from the early FOB2 days, but he was definitely way before Ted's time. But yes, Ted was definitely DB, and we're gonna have Drew on. Drew Hurst Beeson, who wrote the book, saying Ted is in fact DB. He's going to come on and talk about Ted. We're going to talk about Ted, and he's going to cover the DB side of things. I've got him hooked up with several of Ted's running partners, including Leonard Tilley and a few others. Al, gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Geez, I just had a total brain fart. Nonetheless, got him hooked up with those two, and he's got his book together, and it's out, and you guys will love it. Daniel, thank you, man. Yeah, I do too. I like having pictures up there. You know, sometimes it can take away from the guys. But if it's gonna freeze and it's gonna be y'all just sitting it here, me moving and shaking my head while it's frozen, I felt at least y'all would rather have a picture and maybe something smaller to look at, or at least have him in smaller frame to look at and all that. So I think it worked out pretty well. To be honest, I don't know if he would have known much of, I don't know if he would have known. He would have given him his opinion, or he might have just said, I don't know enough to give my opinion. We'll see on part 2. I'll ask him after we have our Ted Braden show on here, but we'll see. But I hope y'all enjoyed it as much as I do. I think we had 39 or 40 people in here at one point in time, which is the most we've ever had. We've got almost 130 something comments, which is the most we've ever had. So y'all really knocked it out of the park here. And one of the important stories, he did go into it a bit, but the first Texas mission he was talking about with John Plaster, that was John Plaster's first Covey mission. So I'll get him to go in more depth on that. But Red, thanks for support, man. You're wonderful. I'm actually getting ready to walk the dogs and watch you and you over y'all's last show on just the Chicago or Dennis Farina special. So I'll check in with you guys later. Y'all have a great day, and I'll be in touch. Thanks for joining in.